Okay, Ashley, you can leave your camera off for now. I'm gonna play some music, and then we're gonna let some people know about the show. I'm gonna use that little menu button at the bottom. You can use it too if you'd like, and broadcast this out to the world. Share
Okay.
it just by hitting that and saying broadcast to the world. It'll give you a link. You can send it out to Facebook, wherever you are wanting to share it. I'm going to
Gotcha.
do the same. All right, we're getting people fed in. We're sharing this out. You guys are listening to the music of my husband, Dan Freeman. All right. All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. You guys, welcome. Welcome. You are in the Laughter After Trauma show. My name is Deanna. I am your host. And I am a speaker, educator, and coach that brings light and lightness to the heavy topic of trauma. I'm a thriver after intimate partner violence. And in my healing journey, I found the beauty in laughter and even in the healing process. And so I believe we're all magic and we all have inside of us everything that we need to heal and to be self-healers. And the Laughter After Trauma show does just that. It highlights everyday people who have triumphed in the face of trauma. So today's guest is Ashley Brown, and Ashley has gone through some significant obstacles and traumas in her life, and she's going to talk to us about it and give us some background in her story. But what they did is that it led her to a place of service and the work that she does. And she started out with doing virtual assisting, but now she does a whole lot more than just a virtual assistant. And I'm going to let her explain that to you. But ultimately, she is passionate about a business that provides support to women who own business, because nobody has the luxury of doing it by themselves, right? We all need someone, we need a team, and sometimes we don't have that built in. And that's when Ashley comes in. She steps in and she can help out. So I am going to go ahead and let's see, let's invite Ashley up to video. And that way we can get to see her beautiful face. There
Hello.
she is. Hey, Ashley. So I want you to tell us a little bit more, because you probably can explain a whole lot better about all the facets of what you do, because I
Mm,
know it's a whole lot more than just virtual assisting. So tell me
yeah.
about that first.
Okay. So it did start off as virtual assistant. So I do have a company assisting with Elegance LLC. So that's my virtual assistant company. And it's dedicated to helping mompreneurs, like we like to call them, basically moms with businesses, with everyday tasks, being a mom, being a wife, struggling with kids and then you're running your business, we try to be superwoman, but we need help. So that's where my company steps in. I like to help. I don't care what brand you have. I'm not particular to that. As long as you're a mom in business, you're my ideal person. So I help with that. That started out in the early stages of the trauma when it started. But the end stages of my trauma is what led to bigger things that I'm currently working on to be able to promote to the world before the end of this month. Because once I start going, I don't like to stop until it's up and running. But I am starting a second company that's going to be strictly dedicated to young widows and the grief process, being a mom and figuring out how to get to chapter two, because that's what it's pretty much called. We all have a chapter one. No one normally has a chapter two when it comes to dealing with life after loss, because you don't expect to get it, especially my age. So my company would be through podcasting and through support groups, 101 and speaking and conferences, and just helping fellow young widows reach chapter two like I'm doing for myself.
Okay, so let's get into that. Let's get into that part of your story because this is what led you to the work that you're doing,
Yeah.
starting with the virtual assisting, but now leading into the next phase because as moms, we all feel pulled. I believe this truly as nurturers and as mothers, we all feel
Hmm.
pulled to help the person who is going through something we've been through. When you've
Yes.
been there and you know that you can be the person that says, let me hold my hand out and help you through something that I've already experienced. We don't need to be 8,000 steps ahead. We just need to be 2 steps ahead and just going, okay, well, this is what's next. And I want others to understand and not have to figure it out on their own. So tell
Right.
us a little bit about your story and what
Okay.
happened. And I like this about my guests and people who listen to my show know this. I don't always know every piece of my guest story. So we met on Clubhouse
Hmm.
and we just messaged each other. I think we were probably on the Mom Link
Yeah.
Clubhouse and we just messaged each other in the back because she started talking a little bit about her story. And I was like, you need to come on my show. And so here we are. So tell me about your story. What happened in your life that made this whole thing pivot and move you into this direction?
Yeah. So in the year of, well, I'll start just to give everyone kind of like how quickly life can happen.
Mhm.
And life does not discriminate. So in 2019, I married my late husband. In 2020, we had our beautiful daughter. 2021 is when the trauma started. So 2 months after we had our daughter, he was involved in a car accident and he became a paraplegic.
Mm.
So as soon as I had put on mommy hat, I had to put on a caregiver hat. So I was trying to figure out how to be a mom, and now I had to figure out how to take care of my husband. So that's when the trauma started of me trying to figure life out. Life had got turned upside down. And that's when I started realizing I want to be at home more. I need to be at home more. I now have a young baby and a husband who needs me. And so that's how I birthed my virtual assistant company, because I was already pretty well versed in doing different things and I had been talking about it years prior. And this was the push I needed because I wanted to be home. Um, I had quit my 9 to 5. I had been in my 9 to 5. I was a 911 dispatcher for 7.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Had worked my way up pretty well in that too, with training new hires. That was pretty much my role every day. But I quit to pursue my 9 to 5 fully, because I was just dedicated at that point. I just took a step out on faith and was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be home. And I knew that was my purpose at the time. Shortly after that, that was 2020, beginning of 2022 is when I finally quit my job.
Hmm.
Um, July 16th at 12:34, my husband went into cardiac arrest at our house. We were fortunate enough that our daughter's grandmother had picked her up the day before to spend the weekend with her. So it was just me and him. He went into cardiac arrest, and I became the other person on the other line. After 7 years of taking people's
Mm.
emergencies, I finally became the person that had to call in myself. Um, so called in. They worked on him for an hour, and that was including transport to the hospital before they came in. Pretty much gave me the worst news I have still received to this day, which was he didn't make it.
Mm.
Um, so then at that point, here's a new hat, a widow. And I was just a week and a half shy of 29 years old.
Wow.
Um, so I basically curled up in a ball, couldn't tell you if it was light or day outside. I began to stay with my mother-in-law just for support. I could I couldn't stay at our apartment anymore because every time I walked in there, you felt what had happened. You felt the
Right.
coldness. Um, and I've never experienced that before, but I believe it's true. You can tell when people say, I can tell something happened in this household or happened in this building, that is very true.
Yeah,
And
there's
I
just a
felt it.
lingering energy, and I truly believe in
Yeah.
energy. And yeah, there is a lingering energy. I said that
Yeah.
even about the house that I'm in.
Yeah,
When I
it's
moved.
people are not lying when they say that. So I went back that first night that he passed, and I broke down at the bedside. I believe I went into a shock. I placed his wheelchair back at his bedside. I pretty much made up his side of the bed as if he was coming home.
Right.
The funny part about that is he had been in the hospital in and out a lot, not even before he became a paraplegic because he played football. So
Mhm.
I was not new to going to the hospital for just different injuries, but he always came home.
Right.
So to tell me that he was no longer coming home,
Right.
I was just like, no, like he always pulls through. There's nothing different about this one. So
Right. Right.
I went into my shock and had to plan a funeral at 28 years old,
Right.
um, and had to do everything. Thank God for the support of friends and family because I was lost. I
Yeah.
cried every night, every
S-
day.
So your baby at this point was
Hmm.
one,
One and a half.
one and a half.
Yeah,
When is it a boy or girl?
it's a girl.
Okay. So your little girl, one and a
Hmm.
half, loses her father,
Hmm.
um, and you lose your husband. But at 2 months was when this accident happened and you
Yeah,
began the caretaking.
yeah.
So I just to kind of create the picture, I want people to understand when you have a 2 month old, you're probably still dealing with postpartum, you're dealing with
Yes,
hormones, you're dealing
yes,
with the aftermath of having a newborn. It's your
yeah.
first baby, so you're also dealing with the adjustment of what it's like
Hmm.
to, wake up every 3 hours,
Yeah.
to feed, to what it's like to literally have no sleep. I remember my aunt gave me a card with my first baby at my shower for him, and he it said, "Oh, this is God's way of saying you're getting way too much sleep," and it is the only card that I remember. It's the only
Yeah.
one I remember because no truer words were ever said.
Yeah,
So,
that is a fact.
like I had a 31-hour labor, so I didn't get sleep. And from
Ooh.
that, I never got sleep, you know,
Oh,
and I think till today, I still don't get sleep. So, because it changes everything. So, when you're dealing with that and you're making those adjustments, this traumatic accident happens that leaves him completely disabled
yeah,
and dependent.
yeah.
And I would venture to say, as a football player, as a person who was probably pretty physical, being
Mhm.
dependent probably was not an easy thing for him either.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And
he hated it. Yeah.
right. And so you're now you're dealing with his emotions and what he's
Hmm.
going through.
Yeah.
We're moms. We just take that, we just take it on, right? So
Yeah.
I got to do it. I just got to do it. That's what I got to do. This is what happened. This is what I'm just going to handle it. I'm going to handle it. And you handle
Yeah.
it and handle it and handle it until eventually your body says no. And
Yeah.
that's when you kind of curl up in a ball and say, okay, I'm just going to sleep for the next couple of years because that's all you, this is basically all you got. So tell me, after this, planning a funeral, and I can't imagine this. So my kids are 32 and 30. All right. So you could be my kid. I can't imagine my kids going through this. And,
Yeah.
we've been through a lot, okay? But just going through this where they're dealing with, you've had your childhood trauma, and now we're going to move into adulthood and losing a mate and so that's a lot. So
Yeah.
tell me, um, first of all, like obviously you went through some phases of grief,
Hmm.
and that first one being denial, you brought that up,
Yeah.
like just making his bed, saying no, he's always come home. But tell me, and I don't believe the order of grief, all of that kind of
Yeah.
craziness,
There's
but we
no
all
order.
know there's no order, there's no time limit, it's not like a neat little package that you could put a bow on it. But tell me, as you were moving through phases, one of the things you brought up, and I want you to maybe kind of go into a little bit, is how important it was to have the support around you. So talk to me a little
Yes.
bit about that.
Um, the funny thing, you know how people say weddings, funerals, you find out who's there for you.
Hmm.
That is true. Um, Through that phase of grief, I gained deeper connections with friends and family that I already had. I lost connections with friends and family that I thought I had. But the ones that were there, the ones who are still here between friends and family, and really I like to say family because those friends are family at this point.
Right, true,
um,
true. Hmm.
Having a support system is so you can't do it by yourself because if you try, you're gonna stay curled up forever.
Hmm.
Literally, my friends came over the night it happened. It was like 5 or 6 of them. We all sat at the table, and they outside of the physical gifts, because you're so kind of out of it, you see what people are giving you physically, but it really doesn't register.
Hmm.
But you don't forget the faces that you see. So we literally sat at a table and I literally just cried and talked to them about it. And that was probably one of the most influential moments in that because it allowed my safe space to
Hmm.
just begin my grief.
Hmm.
um, Late nights, I would text family and text friends, and I would literally tell them I'm about to lose my mind because when it's nighttime, the noise stops. Because when you're planning a funeral, it's constant going, going, going. So during the day, you cry, but it's still you got to wipe your tears and then make these decisions, wipe your tears and go to this errand, wipe your tears, welcome these family members that's coming to support you. But when it's time to lay your head down, a lot of people don't realize while they're sleeping, you're up
Hmm.
all night because you can't fathom going to sleep, like, because it's just different. People don't realize every death is different. Grandparents is different. Parents are different. Spouse, kids are different. When it comes to your spouse, the person that you literally laid your head down with every night, you ate dinner, breakfast, lunch with, you don't realize now all of a sudden you have to do it without them on a random day. It's like, okay, well, yesterday didn't tell you this, but that was your last day doing all of that. So
Right.
everyday stuff is like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, how am I supposed to? I remember asking my friends and family, how am I supposed to eat a meal? And he's not here. Like, that was just mind boggling to me that you guys expect me to eat and he's not here.
Mhm.
So, but having support, even now, even though I'm doing all of these things and creating my business and finding my purpose, grief does not stop. So you just figure out how to move forward a little bit better, but you could still have an anxiety attack as if it was the day it happened. I went through one like 2.5 weeks ago, as if I had just got hit with the news, because grief is just like you said, there's no order of steps.
Right,
It doesn't stop. It's here lifelong,
right,
unfortunately.
right.
So
And I want to kind of pause in this for a second because, you know, it's these things that trigger and bring up something that will
mhm.
cause you to move back into that place. And that's why I think it's so important for people to understand in grief. And I had a woman on here who's lost her mom, her dad, her sister, her son,
Mm,
right? Um, and she, she talked about this because she said, "What the thing is, you don't get over it, right?
yeah.
You learn to move, you learn to live with it,
Mhm.
but you don't get over it." And I feel that's pretty much true of trauma in general,
Yeah.
right? We learn to process and move, but we process in layers and we process in phases. And I think that's the same with grief.
Yeah.
When you're processing and you look at your daughter and your daughter turns 5 and she goes to school on her first day of school, you're going to have a breakdown. I
Yeah.
mean, like, you're going to know that it's coming. Each
Yeah.
time that you have to process through it may feel a little bit different. Maybe it's not as long every time, but you're going to go through it in phases.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people need to hear and people need to recognize
Yeah.
because um, I don't know that if you haven't been there and you haven't been through it, that people truly understand that.
They don't. And that's the thing about trauma and grief. When you're talking to your friends and your family, they're amazing. But it's also important. I have my friends, I have my family, but I'm also in support groups with other widows, because even though my friends and family can understand things to a certain extent, I need also a support group that I can literally say this one line and there's like 15 other women who's like, I know exactly how you feel, and they really do know
Right.
exactly how I feel.
Right.
And so it's vital, if you don't have support groups for whatever trauma or grief that you're dealing with outside of your friends and family, you need it, because what people don't realize too, your friends and family, they mean the world to you. Like, they're wanting to do everything they can to make you feel better. But even sometimes some things they can say can trigger you. And they're
Right.
trying to be the shoulder that you can lean on, and they're
Mhm.
doing the best they can.
Mhm.
But sometimes even what they say, even though they mean the best, can trigger you.
Mhm.
And it's not their fault, but that's when you have to realize I also need a support group that literally fits what I'm going through. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it you gotta have it. Like, you gotta have it.
And so what I'm hearing right there is encouraging people to go ahead and look for the help that you need,
Yeah.
regardless of where that is, right? Like, so I do trauma informed coaching, but I come from the background of intimate partner violence, but I'm also a parent of a sexually abused child.
Mm,
And I want to work and love to work with women who deal with the guilt of feeling like they failed their kids because of this thing that happened.
mm,
So you have to find the support in those areas, right?
yeah.
And I do believe that with grief, whether it's therapy or groups, counseling, coaching, whatever it is,
Mhm.
that will be specific to your situation so that you can see and hear and talk to other people who have been through what you've been through. So, with all of that went on, it led you to start thinking out the box. Like,
Yes.
here's first of all, when you found yourself in the situation where you were the main caregiver, realizing I need to stay home. How am I going to make that happen? And building a business that allowed you to work from home, be the caregiver that you needed to be. You were already on that path of thinking outside the box with your virtual
Yeah.
assisting. So tell me how that path kind of kept shifting. And I believe for everyone, if you follow your intuition, it's going to show you the gifts and the talents that you have and what your purpose
Hmm.
is. So
Yeah.
talk to me about what it's leading into and the things that you want to do and you're putting out there and why.
Okay. So once I finally opened the blinds one day, and I remembered the strength that I had, I started feeling like started turning my why me in a negative way to a why me in a positive way. Kept the same question, but I changed how I was asking myself.
Mhm.
And I am a firm believer in you do not go through things for no reason, but you have to sit and you have to wait and you have to listen to find why that was your purpose or why this is your path now that you are put on. So once I started to do that, that's when I realized, okay, you're 29 now. You're a new mom still because she's only 2 now. You're a new widow, and you're trying to figure out chapter 2. What do I do next? And I started to realize a lot of women like me are looking for other women like me. And you're trying to figure out the next steps because it's brand new. So that's when I started to realize, okay, you have been put in this position to be there for other young women. And even when I say young women, I don't mean women just in their 20s. Because let's be honest, losing a spouse, the way the world thinks, the way we all think, it is not normal to lose a spouse under 50. Let's just be honest. Like, you do not plan to bury your spouse before the age of 50. And you are like, well, where's this community when it does happen to you? It's like, well, where's this community? Who do I talk to? If you do run into widows, they're normally the 70s and 80-year-olds. So you're like, well, I can relate to you in some aspect, but like, where are my 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds that's still figuring out life and still being mom where the kids are still in the house? Like, where are
Right.
those women at?
Who didn't have a 20-year marriage,
Yes,
right? Or a
yes,
40-year marriage to
right.
say,
Because
hey, I lived, right, I have this.
right.
It's
That's where all
different.
the other aspects, because you're trying to figure out, okay, so how do I go back to work? How do I like look at dating? How do I do these things? And like I said, talking to someone who's been in a marriage for 20, 30 years, normally they're probably good with not moving on, or they're already kind of at a place in life where they're really content. But when you're 20s and 30s and 40s, you're like, well, wait, I'm still living life, but how does living life look now? I don't know what to do. So that's when I started being like, okay, I want to create an organization that is built for women to be that support village. We say as moms, it's important to have a village when it comes to your kids. But it's also important to have a village for women, for moms. Like, we love our kids, but we need a village because if we're not good, our kids aren't good, our family's not good. So we're always focusing on, oh, it's a village to raise kids. We need a village for the kids, but we need a village for ourselves. So I wanted to create an organization that creates a village to support young widows, who, whether you're a mom, whether you're in business, As long as you're a young widow, I want to be that avenue for you. I want to speak to you through podcasting because it's so many different things that we need to talk about and that people don't realize that it's a group of women that's dealing with the same thing that the elderly women are dealing with, and we don't know what to do. So I want to connect through women with podcasting. I want to connect with women through 101 because, like you said earlier, we don't have to be 40 steps ahead, but I know how to help you get out of bed because I figured out how to get out of bed. I want to help you with, hey, I still go through those nights where I can't sleep. And you're like, well, how do you even get to where you can at least sleep 2 nights a week? Well, hey, I'm there. I can help you get to where you can get 2 nights of sleep. So I want to be there. I want to be there through the 101. I want to be where we have speaking engagements and conferences to help women learn about spousal support, learn how to deal with parenting, learn how to deal with family. It's so many different things that I'm learning and have already learned that, again, we don't prepare for. We don't prepare to be like, okay, now I'm a single mom. How do I parent? Now, okay, I'm down to one income. So what do I do about how to take care of my family that's still depending on me? A lot of people don't know of resources that are connected to them. Self-care goes out the window when you're grieving. How do I help these women get back to it's okay to still take care of yourself and not feel guilt that I need to take myself to the spa because if I don't, I'm gonna lose my mind, or I need to write, or I need to just vent and cry, or I need to go to therapy. I did learned all of that all on my own. I looked for therapists all on my own and had no idea how to do it because I didn't feel like I had a community of young women who look like me, who are the same age as me, who's trying to figure out all of these avenues and have to keep putting on hats and hats and hats. And I'm like, look, I want this. So since I didn't have it, let me create it for other women so they're not like me. They have a little bit extra help that I didn't. So that's what I'm working on. When I tell you, I'm so excited to be that village and be a part of that village for other young widows because it's a roller coaster that doesn't have an end.
Yeah. So, this is something you said earlier, and and I think it kind of ties into this nicely is that, in the nights, in the silence, in the still moments, after the funeral, after all of
Mm,
that has been tied up, there are these spaces where you feel like you've been surrounded by people, you've been getting the support, you've got all of this, they're bringing you food, you're doing, then
mhm,
everything's finished and it just
mm,
trickles away and you're left in your silence. And you're left with yourself, and it's just you
mhm.
and whatever you believe in your faith, right? And it is a daunting place to be. For me, I know for me, when I'm dealing with a loved one, someone who someone I know who's lost someone, like even just sending a plant to that person 2 weeks after the funeral to say, "Hey, you know what? We're still thinking about you." Because you start to, it's so much, and then it just kind of, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then you're also like what you're saying is then you're left with all this, the rest of the details. Like, how do I get on with life while I'm feeling
Mhm,
this? So, in this new business that you're working on and the things that you want to do through your podcasting or getting information out there, maybe creating, I don't know, checklist programs. I don't know what your plans are,
mhm.
but helping women advocate for themselves, for the
Yes.
things that they need or that they deserve, whether
Mhm,
it's insurance or social security, whatever it is that they get to tap into to help them get from this point to the next point. Is that part of what you're doing?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So it's about, like I said, the self-care. It's about the basic things, the insurance, the account. At 29 years old, I was learning I had to call people and close different accounts. And sometimes you feel like I literally went through this phase of, okay, I know they have this big database of people passing. Why do these people keep calling me? And I realized, well, maybe they don't. So getting that stuff done, but you have to give yourself grace. I was the type of person that I kind of was doing it in the beginning because I wanted to get it over with so I could just sit. I wanted to just sit in my grief and just be left alone. So I was just like, well, let me call these people so they could leave me alone, right? But a lot of people don't realize until you call people, until you call bills that they may have still been getting to them personally, cars. I had to deal with what to do with his car, making the decisions. It's a lot more mental than a lot of people realize. Making the decisions of what to do with his car and being okay with whatever decision I made, right? That was a mental journey in itself. Having to call people and say, hey, I know you're calling to get in contact with him, but he's passed. To have to say those words to 15 or however many different people you got to call on the business side breaks you down each phone call. And you're like, who am I calling? When am I supposed to be doing this? And so I want to help women, one, know if you don't feel like doing it for 3 months, that's okay. But if you are going to do it and when you're ready to do it, let me help you get to the mental point to where you can handle your business and it not push you back in your grief, because that's what it was doing to me. It was pushing me back. It was sitting me back in it. So when I felt like I was getting just a little better and I had to call someone to do details of what to do with something that belonged to him, it put me back into my grief. And I want to help women not let those things keep them there, because unfortunately, the way the world works, we have to handle the business though. We still have to be those wives and moms that we still got to make these phone calls, or like they're going to keep bothering us. Like their businesses don't stop when it comes to the person that passed until you tell them they've passed.
Right.
So that's one of the things, the mental aspect of it. I want to be there for them and help them, guide them. I want to give them, hey, here's these guides to help you in the beginning stages of what you have to deal with. Because I know therapists, I'm not trying to be a therapist, but to have just someone you can talk to say, hey, these are the 5 things that I did to be able to get up and take care of my child. I went through phases to where I was living with my mother-in-law and I knew my child was being cared for. I didn't know who was doing it. I knew she was being fed. I knew she was being changed. I knew she was being taken outside to have a good time. I was barely there. Like I literally laid in the bed and put all my faith and trust in everyone else in the household. And it's okay. But until I had got the kick in my butt that I needed, I was just going to sit there. And I had to remember she lost a parent. Don't let her lose you too. Right. So I want to help women not sit in that and remember, like, these are the 5 things that I did to be able, just here's step 1, to be able to feed my daughter without crying, be able to look at my child without crying, because that's a trigger in itself. It's so many triggers that a lot of people do not realize that exist every day. So I want to help. I want to be that advocate for them to say, hey, I went through it. These are the things that I did. Hopefully these can help you too. It's so much that I have. And the way that I was able to get to that point, I spent a lot of nights crying, screaming, blaming God, and then praying to God saying, okay, as mad as I was at God, I know you're the one that's going to get me out of it though. So let me sit and let me let you heal me and show me what my purpose was. And it took many nights. It's still some nights I cry out to God and I'm like, why again? Why did you
Why?
choose me? Okay.
Why? Why?
But I remember that He chooses people for a reason. And I can either sit here and be mad and stop my life and stop my daughter's life. Or I can say, okay, you place a purpose on my life. This is what I'm meant to do, to let me use what you've put me through and what you've helped me and what you've helped me realize and the things you've revealed to me to help me kind of get up a little bit. Now it's time for me to put that out to the world to help other women.
Mhm. And you got to look at energy, the
Mm-hmm.
energy it takes to stay in that place, to stay in the trauma, to stay in the grief, and the energy to heal. And you can spend your energy either way, but if you
Mm-hmm.
spend your energy in the healing, there will come a time where you don't have to spend as much energy in the grief. But if you
Yes.
allow yourself to keep spending that energy in the grief, it stays like that forever.
Yes.
Right? So it's not about saying you got to do things a certain way. It's about saying understand that you have to give yourself space and grace. It's a
Mm-hmm.
balance. It's a
Yeah.
balance. It's a balance just like anything and everything there is in life. So let me ask you this question. Um, in all of this, did you find a place? Did you come up one day for air and find this
Mm-hmm.
place where you're like, you know what? I feel like I'm breaking the surface. Do you remember
Yes.
anything specifically? Was it a day you went to the park with your daughter and were like, you know what? I didn't cry today and I didn't feel a need to cry today. Were there
Mhm.
places and times where you noticed that laughter?
Yeah, laughter was the hardest part for me because I used to tell people, I can't laugh the same. I'll never be able to laugh the same. How are y'all laughing? And I realized, and my friends, my support system, they helped me realize you're not meant to laugh the same, right? Because you're now in chapter 2. So the way you laughed in chapter 1, unfortunately, that book is closed. So you're going to laugh different. And it's now time to find what makes you laugh. So I was in therapy and my therapist, she kind of woke me up, right? Because I
Mhm.
was just like, every time I look at my daughter, I was just like, I'm like, well, how could her? How am I supposed to do this for her? I was turning every positive into a negative, right? Without even realizing every moment into a negative. So one day, and it's my cousin, we went to a concert. I finally was like, this is my first concert I had ever even been to. Had a ball. And I realized it's okay. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to enjoy music. It's okay to get out. And you do not have to feel. And I truly had one of the best times of my life. And from that, I started taking my daughter out more. I started being like, let me introduce her to just different things. Like I'm now at home. I was complaining so much about not being able to spend time with my child or having to split my time between my child and my late husband because I was a caregiver to him and I was a caregiver as a mom. We're caregivers to our children. So I looked at it and was like, you was complaining this much about I'm missing all of this with my kid. So when I started taking her out, I started to enjoy my child the way she brings so much laughter. Everyone that has come in contact with her always says the joy that she brings is unmatched. And I started to allow my daughter's joy to be on me. And I started to laugh and I started to enjoy. I got reconnected with people that I never thought I would talk to. And they bring me joy that I never thought was possible. So, through spending time with my child, it's not even just one thing. I allowed one thing to be the domino effect.
Mhm.
And through all of those things, I have been laughing again. And I realize Laughter and happiness can exist with grief as well. You can have both, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people find themselves maybe in this headspace of, you know, it's not right to
Mm-hmm.
feel good after
Mm-hmm.
something like this happens. It's not right to have fun. It's not okay because this person is not here and this horrible thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere, without saying it out loud, you think you have to sit in it like it's a
Mm-hmm.
sentence, and it's not. It's not a life
Mm-hmm.
sentence. And it takes a minute. I get that it takes some time to pull through that. It's the same with trauma too. It takes some time to recognize that that's not yours to carry.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I appreciate that because I think saying that out loud, talking about that, will allow people when they hear this to go, okay, even if I'm not there, I can understand what you're saying. I
Mm-hmm.
can understand what you're saying, and I have hope that I can get there.
Mm-hmm.
Because all hope is something where you know it's a place you want to get to, but you believe you can get there. You need that
Mm-hmm.
belief. And that's where people like you and I come in, where you can show them this is what
Mm-hmm.
it's like. So believe it, and it'll
Yeah,
happen
because
for you just like it happened for me.
right, because I definitely went through the anxiety of when I first went out with my friends. I had almost a breakdown because I was just like, "How are you even getting dressed? Like, why would you even be getting dressed to go out with the girls?" And I
Mm-hmm.
literally was just like, I almost was like, never mind. Like, that's okay. But
Mm-hmm.
then I had to realize, like, okay, so you're just never gonna go out ever? Like, cause it's never like it's never gonna feel right. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
like, do I just sit and never just see anyone ever again? But
Right.
so you're gonna go through your anxiety. You're gonna go through your like never mind moments. Like, never mind, I'll try it another time. And that's okay. But you don't want it to always be, you don't want it to be forever a never mind. You want to eventually work out of that and get to like, okay, like I'm excited to get out. You might come home and cry, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. But you still, and that's the balance of grief still happening, but you're still enjoying life. And it's okay to enjoy life. And honestly, people are going to talk, whether as coming from a spouse standpoint, people are going to talk no matter if you move on in any aspect 2 months later, no matter if you decide to start moving on with your life 20 years later. Someone's going to say something about how they felt like you should have did your journey. And unless you've been in the shoes of, in like my case, a widow, I don't really care because you can't, unless you've gone through it. Like, I could never tell a parent how to move on in life that's lost a child until I lose mine. You know what I mean? And so I can never be like, oh, well, how come you were able to go to the movies a month later and you just buried your child? I don't know. And I'm not going to offer my opinion or judgment on it because I've never walked those shoes.
Right. And even walking the shoes that you've walked, you recognize that how it worked for you and how it works for somebody else can be totally different. Time frames are
Very
different.
different.
And we're just all individual people who are trying to get along
Mm-hmm.
here. And so, even though you can have these pointers, these tips, these ways that you can advocate, you also
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to leave space for people to understand that
Yes.
they have their own journey to build.
Yeah.
But
Because
it's
everyone's
okay to
journey
build
is
it.
different.
It's okay to
Yes.
build it. Just build it, you know,
Right.
however you have to. And I think that's another thing that's kind of beautiful that comes out of situations like this. And I think it's beautiful where people are called like you to serve
Mhm.
after something like this happens, that you
Mhm.
go, okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a person who says everything happens for a reason, but I am a
Mhm.
person who says you can find a reason. You can
Mhm.
find reason. You can find growth in anything that happens. You can find
Mhm.
purpose. You can find gratitude in anything that happens. I do believe
Yeah.
that unforeseen occurrences happen. I do not believe that my God of love is going to purposefully inflict pain. Okay.
Yeah.
But stuff happens. It
Mm-hmm.
happens. And when we are shown a way, we're not given that if we can't handle it. You were shown
Yes.
a way, you were shown a purpose, you were shown this thing that you wanted to do to be able to help other young widows. You're not given that calling if you can't do it. So you are fully
Yeah.
equipped because
Yeah.
God put that purpose in you now. And now you
Mm-hmm.
have that ability. You have the ability, and He knows that. And so, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I look at that. But it is a special calling, it's a special person who
Mm-hmm.
is that person who serves. So, if it's okay with you, we have a few more minutes, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
say this before we go into this last pointers that I want to get from you. We have a few people here in the audience, and I want them to know that if you have questions or if you have comments that you would like to say and join us up here on the stage, you can hit the plus sign. I believe in this little bottom left hand corner, you can ask to speak. Um, if you are interested in interacting with us up here in any way, whether it's encouragement, whether it's to share a little bit of your story, ask a question, feel free to invite yourself up here, because I do love to have audience participation. We've had a few people who are commenting, and I'm going to kind of share a couple of things. But I just think that it's important to open the conversation. So if anybody wants to, that's great. Um, so Devon said that I feel your pain. You are not alone. And then somebody agreed that's so true in the conversation, which I'm sure was in the part of, the support system and the healing process and grief.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, if you guys want, raise your hand. We'll let you come up here and we'll be glad to talk. Um, but meanwhile, and don't feel obligated. If you don't come up, it's fine. But meanwhile, I want to ask you, what are a couple of pointers that you would love people to take away from this? If you had two or three things that you could say, like, these are the things that helped me most, these are the things I want you to remember from this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
what would be those things you want people to take home?
The first pointer would be to give yourself grace. And that's something I had to learn for myself because the way I'm built, the way I like to do things in life, I like to go at things head first. And for the first time, this was not one of those things. I tried and it was not working. So I had to learn it's okay. It's okay to sleep. It's okay to not care. But along with giving yourself grace for that, you have to also give yourself grace knowing that I can get up, I can go outside, I can begin to start my next chapter in life without forgetting everything that happened in chapter one, because without chapter one, there would be no chapter two. So you have to remember, and it's okay to give yourself grace. Another pointer would be to not hesitate, to not put off some form of therapy. And I say some form of therapy because a traditional therapist may not be for everyone. Whether that's writing and talking to someone professionally, whatever it is, whether it's one thing or a combination of things, please do it because the way it has helped me, I wrote and I still write. I saw a therapist and I still see a therapist. Those things played a vital part in me getting my feelings out to my pen and paper. Because when you're writing, for me, you start to say a lot of things that you're afraid to say out loud, but you have to get it out. You can't keep it in, because if you're okay, I don't feel comfortable telling this person, or I don't feel comfortable telling this family member, because the crazy thing is, as you're the one who's most affected by the grief, you're still thinking of other people's feelings, and you're still treading lightly on things to say or not to say, because you also are still realizing, well, they still lost that same person, they just had a different relationship. And it's crazy that, and I don't know if it's a woman thing, a mom thing, I don't know what it is, but you tend to be like, well, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, even though you're the one most affected by it. So writing allowed me to literally get out everything that I felt, whether it was anger towards him, anger towards God, anger towards myself. And I didn't have to worry about if it offended anyone,
Mm-hmm.
because it was my thoughts and my thoughts only. And so, whatever form of therapy works, because writing, a lot of people don't like to write. That's okay. I love to write. I love to talk. So, talking to someone that was able to have me shift my perspective is really the two things I would tell people when you're dealing with grief, whether it's dealing with a spouse, dealing with the child, whatever form of grief it is. Those are the two pointers I would say to consider, not to do, but consider, because I might find something 5 years later that I'm like, oh, I wish I had thought about this in year one.
Yeah.
That's the thing about grief.
Right.
It keeps evolving, and you
Right.
keep finding new things. But those are the two things that in the beginning of my journey, if you can do it, if you can find someone to talk to, and if you can try to write out your feelings, please do
Yeah,
it.
and I want to just say something to this point because you know, the grace part and the flow of consciousness, however you put it out there, whether it's writing, painting, talk therapy, coaching, whatever it is, both of those things are also advantageous for anyone in
Mm-hmm.
life, anywhere, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you could be the most successful of people and have all the things, right? We still have all the stuff that's going on here. And even if
Mm-hmm.
it's just a brain dump, right? I like to call
Mm-hmm.
it brain dumping in the morning, you can it's beneficial. So I love that you brought that up because I think people also need to hear that whatever you're dealing with, the anger, the sadness, the overwhelm, the stuff you can't say to the other people around you who knew this person,
Mm-hmm.
you can get that out by
Mm-hmm.
writing. You can get that out by talking to a complete stranger,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether it's a therapist or a coach or whatever you tap into in those arenas, you can get that
Mm-hmm.
out. You could probably get that out in your support group because
Mm-hmm.
people are feeling similar and they didn't know your
Mm-hmm.
person. So
Yeah.
it's being able to get the stuff that's in out. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
And just being able to pull that out. Because once it's out of you, that's got to feel like a relief.
Yes. You got to
Even,
get it out.
right,
You
even if
got
it doesn't, even if it's like you look at it and you go, how could I have said such a thing?
to.
Right? But you got
Yeah.
it out. It's not
Yeah.
like you're going to feel that way forever, but it's a way of processing.
If you
And
don't get it out, you're going to sit in your grief, right? And you're never going to open the next page to chapter 2, because you're
right,
going to be stuck in chapter 1.
right,
So
right.
if
I
you
love
don't
that.
get it out in some form or fashion, you're not going to be able to start your chapter 2, and you have to start chapter 2.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So so really that getting it out is your segue. It's the last
Hmm.
paragraph of chapter 1 so that you can move to chapter 2. You can turn that
Yeah.
page. I love that.
Yeah.
I love the writing analogy. I like to write too, but you know, it's a neat way of doing. So I'm going to share what Tracy just wrote here. She said, my older brother passed away when I was 20 and helping support my older sister during all of this. She had just had her third child, but we were both impacted deeply. I did go through therapy years later and was really good for me to move forward. So
Mm-hmm.
just again solidifying and just reiterating to the folks here that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have to you may have to try a couple of things before you hit on the thing that
Mm-hmm.
works the right way for you. For me, coaching was it. I went through therapy, and I did do a lot of writing. Coaching and mindful doodling tend to be the two
Mm-hmm.
things that work the best for me. I
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to necessarily always write free
Mm-hmm.
form, although I do journal. But
Mm-hmm.
more for me works the doodling, the painting, thought bubbles, this
Mm.
mindful way of doing it. But I've had to explore, like, for
Yeah.
years I've explored many different things, and doodling is just something I've come across in the last year or so, and it's been such a freeing thing for me. Maybe it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have been 6 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
like you
And
said.
that's the
So
funny thing about grief, like, because it's changing so much, what may work now, you might get to a point in 6 years later or 10 years later where you're still dealing with grief, obviously, but now those things don't work. So now you're back figuring out, okay, so what can help me in year 10 of my grief
right,
that
and
didn't help in year one?
right. And that's why I say it comes in phases and it comes in layers, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go through different phases of life, and that's going to come up. And I talked about this actually just recently because I'm working with a nonprofit who is a community advocacy center for children. So it's a children's advocacy center for children who have been sexually abused. And I talk about this because I talk about it because of what happened with my children and with my
Mm-hmm.
daughter. And my daughter and I have talked very openly about it. And it's when you started dating, when you got married, um, when you had your first child and it was a boy, but then you had your second child and it was a girl.
Mm-hmm.
When your niece was the age you were when things started, when,
Mm-hmm.
all of these little markers
Mm-hmm.
brought up something different. When
Yep.
your husband came home in the wrong shoes or the wrong jeans,
Mm-hmm.
you see, it brings it up again, and you
Yeah.
don't know. It comes out of the blue. It's not something you
Yes.
expect. It
Yeah.
just comes up and you're like, whoa, and it just hits you and it blindsides you.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you add a tool to your toolbox, whether that's the therapy, the journaling, the exercising and learning how to take care of yourself and give yourself grace, when you get these tools in your toolbox, you are able to use them the next time something comes up. And
Mm-hmm.
each time you will probably add additional tools, but
Yeah.
you are going to be more equipped to handle it and process it each time that it comes up.
Yeah.
And so I think it's beautiful. I love the niche that you're um really focusing in on. I think that it
Yeah.
is absolutely needed because we
Mhm.
don't think about this when we think about young women being widows. It doesn't
Yeah.
come to most of our minds. Like you said, I'm 54. I don't expect to lose my husband in my 50s. Okay.
Exactly. Like,
All
you
right.
don't
Um,
it's not normal in society. That's like, "What?"
so losing a husband at 28, having to take care of a husband at 27, that's a lot. That's a
Mhm.
lot. And when you're in that phase of your life, you don't
Mhm.
expect it either. You
Right.
expect to be building your life, creating a career, doing the things, and then here
Right.
you are. Here you are. So
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing mission that you have. So whatever we can do to support, why don't you shout out? And I will put this in the show notes, but shout out your website, your Instagram page. Tell us where we can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, so you can, on two different platforms, and there are two different meanings for the platform. So my first one is Instagram. You could go to Assisting with Elegance. That's where you'll get connected if to my virtual assistant company. But that's where you'll also find my updates of me with my second company as well, which of course will also be on Instagram as well. But you'll get those updates and you'll be able to know what page that's going to be and things of that nature once I release the name. I also am on TikTok. I chose TikTok because it's a way to bring laughter, but still address motherhood, being a widow, and just being a young entrepreneur, but with more lightheartedness to it. So if you're needing laughter, if you're needing videos that's like, oh my gosh, I feel how she's feeling, but you can laugh with it, that's where my TikTok comes in, just to give you fun content, but niching to widowhood, motherhood, and being a young entrepreneur as well.
Okay. And what's your TikTok handle?
Assisting with Elegance as well.
Okay, so they're both the same handle, but you
Hmm.
have just a little bit of a slant in your TikTok, which I think is also perfect because it also ties to your age, the young
Hmm.
widowhood. I think it really, I think that audience is right there watching those
Hmm.
videos and being able to relate and gain some not just insight, but some encouragement,
Yeah.
that it doesn't stay dark
Right.
forever.
Right.
So I love it that you can find your laughter after
Yes.
trauma, which is why I do this show. I
Yes.
think
It
people
is
just need to,
possible.
yes, it is possible. It is possible. It's possible. All right. Well, I appreciated, Ashley, for you coming on here and sharing your story with us, sharing the
Thank you for
encouragement with
having
us.
me.
And like I said in the show notes, I'll add it here in this show. And what I'll do, and just so everybody knows, you all know here that you can find the replays here on Fireside. If you're listening on the World Wide Web, which we have a few people listening out there, you can also always look at Fireside online and look at this show anytime you want to. I have a YouTube channel called Laughter After Trauma. All of my shows are simulcast to my YouTube channel. They also live there forever. And then, of course, we will be adding all her information into our show notes, but also this will get edited. I don't edit much. I just kind of put a nice little introduction and outro on here. And then we'll be pulling that over to the podcast, which is also called Laughter After Trauma. And it is found on every podcasting platform, wherever you listen to your podcasts. But if you're going to do a review, do it on Apple. Okay, that's all I'm saying. That for whatever reason, that one matters more. So that's where you can find this in the future. And listening to the replays, feel free to share this out with people because I think that this is something that people do really need to hear.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, next week I have a special guest. His name's Paul Hutchinson. He has worked for a long time undercover in sex trafficking of children,
Oh,
and he
wow.
is now coming out from working undercover, and he is working to support and advocate and use his name as an influence to bring awareness to this, so that these agencies and these nonprofits and these foundations that work with law enforcement to get the sex trafficking eliminated. He's working with them and bringing billions of dollars into that industry to get, you know, help for these children. So he is going to be on my show next week, talk about his story, talk about why he does what he does. And we'll, I'm sure, find out how we can support some of his foundations. So that's where we'll be next week. Ashley, again, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Again, thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. I would love to have you back anytime. And I would love to
Yes.
come on your podcast when you get it up and running. So just let me know
Yes.
if that's a
Yes. I
possibility.
definitely will.
And, women helping women, I think that's amazing. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some music. Ashley, if you want to turn your video off or whatever, I'm going to play some music while we head out. And we will see you guys next time. I'll talk to you through the outro. So you guys have been listening to the Laughter After Trauma show, recorded live here on Fireside. The music is by Dan Freeman. I want to thank you guys for joining our conversation. I'm Deanna, your coach that leads you to your laughter after. I see you and you are beautiful. Until next time, love each other, stay connected, shine on.